Okay, I don't see a hand, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. All right, Miriam, you're first on the left of the slide, so why don't we go ahead and get started with you? I think would be great to hear a little bit about your connection to Alphabet, what you're doing now, and your contracting experience.
Yeah, thanks all for having me here. It's really exciting. So I spent about 4.5 years at Google. I got to work with Nate for about half of that time, I think. I was on the partnership side, so partnerships development manager, working on the business communications team on the messaging side. So I worked for a little bit on the RCS RBN messaging, and I worked a lot on a product called Business Messages, which is now sadly going away from what I hear. I was part of the layoffs last January, so it's been a little bit over a year now that I've been a Xoogler, and I'm currently right now in the middle of a contract back at Google as a partnerships manager on the research org. Happy to talk a little bit more about that. And I've done a bit of consulting work as well over the past year for some contacts and some friends. And I am looking for full-time work, but also, considering continuing to contract, and we can talk more about why I feel the way I do about the options as it goes by. Anything else? Am I missing?
Yeah, what is one or two like TLDR takeaways that you want the crew to know about contracting generally, that like if nothing else they get from today?
I think it's really important to kind of understand what you want and where you are and set your expectations correctly. I have some really mixed emotions about contracting and really mixed feelings about contracting and whether it's something that I really do want to continue to do or not. I think and I have no regrets about doing it. I think it's great, but I have really mixed emotions kind of about the long-term plans for it. And Judy, you mentioned like a lot of the companies had reached out to you. I got tons and tons of people reaching out to me, and it feels like a lot of noise. And so I also have kind of really mixed feelings about the whole process. And I found that quite painful. So I think my takeaway is to really just set your expectations. I think I want people to understand like kind of how it all works and what it all sort of looks like.
Awesome, great. And I'm sure we'll get into that during our Q&A discussion. But thanks, Miriam, for sharing a little bit about your experience. Eldon, you're next in the lineup. If you want to do the same thing, tell a little bit about your experience, your connection to Google Alphabet, your contracting experience, and what you're up to now.
Yeah. So I was with Google for 9.5 years. I did technical hands-on work with Cloud TI as a facilities technician for 5 years, and then got converted over to a project manager. Within 2 years after that, I was a program manager. You know how it happens. And I was working on the enterprise asset management for the entire data center fleet before I left. We were working on growing that team from what was one business analyst and one project manager to now I think it's over 100-something folks. So I was happy to slow down a little bit right after it, but right after that, I actually was contacted directly instead of, because I was in the same boat looking what am I going to do now? And I got contacted directly from one of my mentors and then one of my friends who was a cross team to go work at Yahoo. So I worked at Yahoo doing some engineering work and some more project management work as a full-time employee. But the culture fit kind of took me a little bit it kind of surprised me more than I thought it would. So I took a step back from that. And I've also been working on education at the same time. So all of that kind of work too. Well, I'll just focus on a little bit more of education as well. But then I realized I still want to get back out there. You know, there's this feeling and this like sort of deep gut feeling of I need to get back to work. I need to do something. I didn't feel comfortable trying to find a job and just going to school for some reason. So then I did find one, and I think to copy or maybe repeat some of the same things, there was a lot of noise coming in. I was getting, do this consultation for a day, we'll pay you this much per hour. A lot of that was coming through, and a lot of go stand up this SAP instance over here or do something to that effect, right? It took a long time to find the right fit with a contractor, and it wasn't with Google. This is actually with a company called Insight Global, and I'm working for a local utility company, standing up some of their going through their digital transformation phase. They have a lot of software, hardware, a lot of things that are 15 plus years out of date. So it's a huge, not only just system shock, but culture shock for a lot of them as well. And they have a lot of new and great people. So I've really enjoyed that part of it. They do have some things, and I'll point out two things here. I agree with the goal setting. That's key. I will reiterate that same point. The second thing I'll say is that not every contract position is just a contract and end. This one is very much kind of rooted in how that system has always been. They sort of start with contractors in some of these digital or technological roles and move to full-time employment. So you have to really read into and do a lot of research, I feel like, with the contracting roles that come through. So thank you.
Thanks, Eldon, for sharing. And finally, we have Robert.
Yeah, hi. I was at Microsoft for 10 years as FTE. Then I did a couple small companies and ended up at Google, I guess, 9 months before the big layoff. So I was only at Google for 9 months. I was also on the business messaging team that seems like a lot of people here were, and took a contract role mainly to kill some time until the economy got better. For the TLDR, I kind of have a negative connotation with contracting, and I did before, just kind of took it as a backup plan. But I do think it can be appropriate for some people, like if they want to go into consulting or if they have specialized skills that they can leverage in a short amount of time. And I think it can also be useful, like Miriam did, to get back in at a gold star company if that's your best way. But I don't think people should rely on that as a path to get back into those companies.
Great. Thanks, Robert. So Nate and I did have some fairly open topic questions that I think, since we're missing, we're down one panelist, and we're happy to kick off the Q&A with some of those broader topics. And I know one of the topics that came up for us was thinking about the difference between like culture of being an FTE and being a contractor, and like having the mindset of like, when you are approached with this contract or consulting gig, like what are some of the things that you have to think about in terms of negotiating an offer, and what are some of the models that can take? Because it could come from an agency that is staffing for a client, or directly from a company to offer a contract directly to you. So what are some of the things that people should be thinking about as they're evaluating a contract or a consulting offer?
I think, so for me, I'm not looking, when I took the contracting job I have now and some of the consulting jobs I have now, I wasn't thinking of them as my long-term work. I think to kind of Robert's point, I'm thinking of them as trying to work out what to do. I'm kind of waiting for the economy to get better. And so I wasn't really negotiating as much. I just kind of was more inclined to just take what they were offering to some extent. There are some contracting gigs that pay an absolute fortune. You can earn a lot more. That's not what I've seen. But I don't care as much. This isn't my future plan for making a ton of money. It's not my future job. It's more than paying the bills, and it's filling my days, and it's getting me some really interesting experience, is how I looked at it. So I didn't do a lot of negotiation. I wanted things that I was interested in, things like that. I do think this sort of answers your question, and it sort of doesn't. I have two other things to sort of comment on. One is I'm a business development person. I'm a partnerships person. I do think there's a lot of difference in the opportunities available for BD than there are for engineers, for some of the other teams, marketing. There's some sales opportunities, and I think they're all really different. And I've seen that the BD opportunities, the partnership opportunities are a lot more limited. And I think that has to do with the relationships that you grow over time. So I do think there's some differences there that I can't speak to the engineering side. The other thing is just on the culture, like, it's kind of cool that I don't have to have that same passion and that same commitment. Google's actually changed some of their contracting policies since I was at FTE. I'm not allowed to have anything on my phone. So they won't let me have email or calendar or chat or anything on my phone, which is really annoying because I wake up in the morning with no clue what I'm doing for my day because I can't remember from when I checked when I finished the day. But also, like, when I walk away from my computer, I can't work. I work 40 hours a week. I bill 40 hours a week. And I don't have, perf or grad or whatever they're calling it now. I don't have any of those kinds of things. It's kind of awesome. It's just the level of stress I experience in my life is significantly lower. And I'm kind of into that. But there is a cultural difference, right? Like, I have the red badge and I don't have access on the computer, and I can't, like, I go to random pages and I can't access things, and I get booted out of meetings occasionally because I'm not allowed to hear that topic. And it's a little weird. I don't take it personally, but it's weird.
I would agree with that entirely. I think that everything up to there is some differences with engineering. Absolutely. It almost seems like there's a lack of talent potentially in a lot of that area. So if in the, especially like the utility sector, they're still trying to figure out what technology it is, it feels like, right? What is Google Drive? I don't understand what Kubernetes is. Can somebody explain that to me? They're still trying to figure out, and they have some really smart people, but it's much slower, right? But absolutely with the contracting part, right? I'm not expected to be up until 10 o'clock at night working through, an IBM contract for some reason to do so that we can have software deployed tomorrow, anything like that, right? Or make sure that we have some suite updated and all of the data ready to be converted tomorrow or anything like that. It's exactly 40 hours. And they actually don't even want to talk about overtime. They were trying to remove that from my contract as much as they could,
Yeah, so I guess I had the opposite experience. I was hired at an R&D group, and I'm basically an FTE that's cheaper for them. And like I said, I mainly took it because kill time, basically. So usually contractors are there to fill a job, but like I had similar experiences. Like my first day, they're like, I know we get this sometimes, but we don't want you to feel like you're a second-class citizen, but I'm not allowed to go to meetings. And it's just like a generic all hands where there's some business, but like it's more like the social aspect. So I wasn't really motivated to meet my coworkers, things like that as much. And going back to my time at Microsoft, when I was interviewing contractors and we'd hire them, they'd come and they wouldn't really socialize because they know they're going to switch teams after a while. So going back to the culture question, it's definitely different. I'd say it's worse, but this is anecdotal. My girlfriend, she works at an business expense company. The contractors are always the first to be let go, and maybe they expect that because they're only there for a year anyway. So you shouldn't expect to live out your full contract, essentially. And my stress is higher, and I'm working till 10 at night just because your boss has like meetings to present to, and you still want him to write a good review for you and things like that. So for me, the stress level's the same. I'm working the same amount of hours as I would as an FTE and billing less. So I guess it sort of just depends. I could push back and say, hey, this is more than 40 hours worth, but part of it is, like I said, I joined an R&D team. So we have project managers and they're expecting deliverables, even though you're researching things like that. So it depends what you're going for. Like if you're going for consulting, just do the billable hours. Maybe you can work 2 jobs simultaneously. But if you're just using it to kill time, don't be surprised if you get a contract role that you're basically an FTE that doesn't have to go to as many meetings.
That's actually a great segue into the next question I had. And then, you guys touched on some of the themes that we had hoped to touch on in our planning. So I'll have this be the last question before we open it up for full Q&A. How are you guys thinking about, how do you guys think about balancing your contract work with the FTE, with the search for a full-time role? Just because, everyone says looking for a full-time role is a full-time job in itself. So we'd love to hear a little bit about, your experience trying to balance that as well.
Yeah, I guess I'm not having an issue with it really. So I guess I think one thing I think Robert mentioned earlier about trying to get back into Google, I spent quite a bit of energy doing that a while ago, and it was just frustrating. So I was kind of using some of my time at Google while I was ramping up and stuff like that to do that. It was just depressing and getting me nowhere. I think a lot of that has to do with leveling, and we're now past our 1 year, which depending on who you ask makes a difference. I don't know. But basically, I haven't changed my plan very much. I apply for a couple jobs every day. Most of them disappear into the ether, as I'm sure many of us have seen. So, I'm not really treating either job as necessarily a full-time job. I've been 40 hours a week. Sometimes I'm really busy during those 40 hours. Sometimes I'm really not. So I kind of have time to do both. And I'm also trying not to, I've gone through panicky phases in my job hunt process where I'm like, oh, I have to apply for all the jobs. I have to do it now. But that got me nowhere and stressed me out and got me confused. So I kind of apply for a few, do the homework, apply for a few, do the homework. But so few of them make it to a process where I actually have to do a great deal of work, and it's not feeling like a full-time job for that in my case.
Yeah, I would agree to that too. I'm using this actually a little bit differently probably. So in my role, there's plenty of open full-time positions, but again, it goes back to they kind of don't hire full-time employees for technology-based work. They call it technology services, so they have business services and technology services, very similar to a lot of other structures, but they don't hire full-time employees. So what I can do, or what I have been doing, since I've already been networking anyways and meeting with a lot of the directors, executive leadership, CIO, COO, CFO, I get FaceTime with them. So it works out pretty well to at least connect with them. And then if not just them, I get to go across the industry too. So they have, they actually let, and not, I guess not let, but we're allowed to come with them to conferences and stuff, right? So I get to talk, actual technical shop about all of the stuff that we're doing in the projects that we're trying to stand up for this digital transformation. So I'm kind of sort of doing two birds with one stone, and I mirror that a lot of the job applications that get put out there just disappear into the ether. And I believe even some of my mentors who are still over at Google are like, yeah, we have this perfect idea for a job for you. We'll see if this works out. And then they decide to go in, not to their fault, but somebody else just decides we're going to go in an entirely different direction with that position. And they hire somebody who has no experience in what they were doing. So that same person, that same mentor is actually transitioning themselves out of the area that they're in because of the state that they're being given for direction, So I feel for them. I actually feel for them more than myself at this point, because I feel like I have a little bit more sure footing, and at least I know where I'm going and what I want to do. Yeah, I think that's it.
So for me, I actually asked the contracting firm, what the norms are for how long, am I obligated to stay the full year of the contract, or my case was 9 months. So I didn't want a full year if I could help it. And they were like, yeah, you might burn some bridges, so you should stay for most of it. So I sort of anecdotally felt obligated to stay about 70% of it, which was annoying because I had an interview with, I had FANG recruiters contacting me earlier, in January, and I'm like, oh, I'll interview in April, and now they're ghosting me because the position's gone, I assume. So as far as balancing the contract with the job search, it's tough. It depends how busy you are. I was pretty busy the past few weeks, so I haven't, but As I said, I was sort of feeling obligated to stay about 70% of the contract, and that's up now. So I'm just starting to interview and look as well. So I have an interview next week. I don't have time to study for it, so we'll see how that goes.
The other thing I just wanted to say was, I think I am doing a lot of networking, but I don't, specifically at Google, I'm having issues with, they're treating me like an external employee. And personally, I kind of did it, but I'm having issues with leveling. So they've done a lot of shifts on the leveling front. And so they're kind of cutting back on some of the higher levels, and that varies. I think what the higher levels are varies a bit based on your org and things like that. But there's a lot of like L4, L5s on the partnership side, and they're looking for very specific things. So it's just kind of within Google itself, it's a little bit all over the place in terms of what they're looking for. They kind of open roles. The biggest thing I'm seeing is they open roles and they get so many internal people applying for those roles, more so than ever before from what I'm hearing, because there's so much shifting. They, every time they have a round of layoffs at Google, or every time someone thinks they might have a round of layoffs, all the people that worry about being impacted apply for all the jobs that open up. So I was talking to a recruiter at Google last week, and they basically said, yeah, we don't actually have the bandwidth to do any coffee chats. So normally they do like some coffee chats. We don't have the bandwidth to do any of those. You just have to apply, and we're just going to screen the resumes. We're just getting too many people for every job. And so we just can't do it. So, I've had managers, I've had colleagues sort of wiggle me in a little bit, but even then I'm one of so many people, many of whom are already at Google officially.
Great. Nate, was there anything else that we wanted to cover before we open it up for Q&A?
I think that's pretty much it. I guess if there's just one last thing that I would ask you all before we open it up for question and answer, I guess it would be, have any of your thoughts about contracting changed since you have been in it versus like how you may have thought about contracting as an FTE now that you're on the other side of it? Have your thoughts shifted on that, both good or bad?
My short answer is no. I think it's a pretty valid, it's meeting the need I need it to meet. It's pretty much what I expected. I will say that the thing that I don't, in my case, like about it, and the same thing goes for consulting work, is I just prefer the relative security of having a job and knowing I guess given the current economy, I don't know I'm going to have a job, but knowing the benefits, knowing this, I signed my contract with Google as a short contract with the possibility to extend. And the idea of having to continue to do this, I'd rather just go find a job rather than have to do it. And even if I had a long contract, you can only at Google and most of the things, you could do a 2-year stint. And then you have to take 6 months off and do another 2-year stint. And that it gets really complicated, but that applies even if you take like a month break here or there. And yeah, if I could get a 2-year deal, that'd be great. But the thought of just having to kind of continuously go through the contract process to do it, I kind of was expecting there to be some shortcut around that, and there isn't. And I find that frustrating. And I find kind of some of the way benefits work. And I didn't realize that at Google anyway, you don't get paid if you don't work. Like, we don't get vacation time. You get some sick days, you get a couple holidays, but you get no vacation time. Which annoys me, but but yeah, my opinion overall hasn't changed. I don't love it. It works. I get why. I love the no stress thing, but for me, yeah.
I would say that I am more on the maybe fence I agree with a lot of what Miriam said for sure. It absolutely makes sense. And I think I still want the job security too, right? I think that I'm kind of, it's like it feels very comfortable that I've already been told they'll renew my contract and they'll give me a raise, but I'm in the same boat. I have no vacation. And I'm expected to work every day, and there'll be no PTO and unless I get hired. And then if I do get hired, I will take a huge pay cut as well, right? To work with this company. But the difference being that I think because the company's smaller and starved for talent and has such old ways of doing things, that it's kind of worked well, maybe on accident. The company has treated me more like a full-time employee. I've never had any issues getting anything done. I don't have any of what I experienced when we, did anything at Google with TVCs. So it's definitely more on the maybe fence, but I think I still agree that, I still feel insecure at any given time. But I think I also feel insecure from the fact that I was with Google for 9.5 years and I thought I'll be with Google forever. And then suddenly one day I wasn't, right? So, fool me once, shame on me. So I still think there's cases where it probably works. And I think it's more of a take it on a case by case basis with what does work. Otherwise, it probably is going to be like everybody says it is, because it is. That's why they say it, right?
Yeah, I don't have that much to add. My views haven't changed. Back in the day at Microsoft, people kind of viewed them as second-class citizens, cheaper labor, and seems to be the norm, I guess.
I will say on that front, I think overall at Google, we're treated as second-class citizens, right? I can't access things, I can't stay in meetings, but my specific team, for the most part, treats me as pretty much an equal. I don't necessarily do some of the same work because I'm only there for a short time. My specific role is I'm in for someone who's on leave. So I'm not getting these projects that span like a year because that would be ridiculous. Whereas they're doing these kinds of more complex, more interesting projects, and I'm doing not that same level, but that has nothing to do with their opinion of me or anything like that. I know they think my work is great. They've expressed that. They treat me well. I'm included when they can include me. And that's definitely a team thing. I can see how on some teams, I've seen it from the other side, that they can be treated like second-class citizens. But I think my team is treating me as well as they can, given the situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, mine too. It's just like, if there's like a team lunch, they'll, pick a lunch up for me, but I never know when that meeting is. So like, I don't know if I should bring a lunch or not.
Right.
All right. So I think, yeah, perfect. We'll open it up for Q&A. So I guess Nate will stop recording here. And folks, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll monitor the chat as well. Shamika, I think you